Hello there. Welcome to the Truly Criminal Network. We are excited to have you here. The date January 29, 2024, will forever be marked in Fort Wayne, Indiana's history as the day two promising young lives were extinguished. In a residential area on Romey Avenue, a parked car became the scene of an unthinkable tragedy. Inside that vehicle, police discovered the bodies of 17-year-old Adijah Oki and 18-year-old Lamarian Bailey, both fatally shot in what would later be determined a premeditated double homicide. The news spread quickly across Fort Wayne, a city where violent crime exists, but rarely claims such young, promising individuals with bright futures ahead. Adijah, just months from her high school graduation, had already established herself as a rising star in the modeling world. Her portfolio included appearances at LA Fashion Week, with New York Fashion Week on the horizon. Beyond her modeling success, she operated her own makeup business, Glammed by Armani, showcasing her entrepreneurial spirit. Her academic achievements had secured her a full-ride scholarship to Marian University, where she planned to study business. Lamarian Bailey, originally from LaGrange, Georgia, had moved to Fort Wayne, pursuing new opportunities. His exceptional football talents had begun to attract attention, marking him as an athlete with genuine potential.
Blocked, deflected, and intercepted. Cuts it back in. Can he take it to the house? Number 20, Lamarian Bailey. Another stutter step and cut and tackle.
Though less public information exists about Lamarian, compared to Adijah's well-documented achievements, those who knew him described a dedicated young man determined to succeed both on and off the field. The scene that awaited first responders that January evening told a grim story. Multiple gunshot wounds indicated a deliberate attack, not a random act of violence. The Allen County Coroner's Office pronounced both teenagers dead at the scene. As investigators secured the area, residents emerged from nearby homes, stunned by the violence that had erupted in their neighborhood. What made this case particularly notable was not just the ages of the victims, but what had transpired days before their deaths. Both Adijah and Lamarian had been active on social media, with Adijah maintaining a popular TikTok account where she shared makeup tutorials and glimpses into her modeling career. Days before their deaths, they had live-streamed an encounter with police that had gained significant attention online. The Fort Wayne community responded with shock, grief, and outrage. Vigils formed within hours of the news breaking. Classmates, friends, family members, and even strangers gathered to honor two young people whose futures had been violently stolen. Schools brought in counselors to help students process the tragedy. Local news outlets covered the story extensively as residents demanded answers and justice. What happened to these teenagers wasn't simply a tragedy. It was a crime that would require months of investigation to solve. The questions were numerous. Who would target these promising young people? Was their recent police encounter connected to their deaths? How could someone so methodically plan and execute such violence against teenagers with no known criminal connections? As the community mourned, detectives began the painstaking process of collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, and following digital trails that would eventually lead to two suspects whose actions would reveal disturbing patterns of behavior and raise serious questions about youth violence in America. Before we continue with this heartbreaking story, I want to take a moment to connect with you, my viewers. Cases like Adijah and Lamarian's deserve attention and reflection. If you're finding value in learning about true crime cases that mainstream media often doesn't fully explore, please consider supporting this channel. Hit the like button to help this video reach others who appreciate thoughtful analysis of important cases. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'm committed to bringing you well-researched content that examines not just what happened, but why it happened, and what we can learn from these tragedies. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts on youth violence, or any questions you have about this case. I read every comment and often incorporate viewer perspectives into future videos. Now, let's continue examining what happened to Adijah and Lamarian, including the troubling social media broadcast that preceded their deaths. Born on April 27, 2006, Adijah Oki embodied the spirit of ambition and creativity that defines many successful young entrepreneurs. At just 17, she had established herself not only as a student, but as a businesswoman and emerging talent in the modeling industry. Those who knew her consistently mentioned her heartfelt smile and warm personality, qualities that made her stand out both in person and on camera. Adaija's passion for beauty translated into tangible success through her makeup business, Glammed by Armani, where she demonstrated her artistic talents and business acumen. This venture wasn't just a hobby, it was a legitimate business that showcased her entrepreneurial drive at an age when most teens are still figuring out their interests. Her modeling career had already reached impressive heights with participation in LA Fashion Week, a notable achievement for models of any age. Her next target was New York Fashion Week, one of the industry's most prestigious events. These weren't just dreams, they were concrete plans in motion, representing steps on a carefully planned career path. Academically, Adaija had secured a full-ride scholarship to Marian University, where she intended to study business, a fitting choice given her early entrepreneurial success. This scholarship highlighted not just her academic abilities, but also her potential to contribute meaningfully to her chosen field. On social media, particularly TikTok, Adaija had built a following with content showcasing her makeup skills and positive energy. Her online presence reflected the same warmth and creativity that drew people to her in person, making her a popular figure in both digital and real-world spaces. At 18, Lamarian Bailey had already demonstrated significant potential as an athlete. Originally from LaGrange, Georgia, he had relocated to Fort Wayne to pursue new opportunities, a move that spoke to his determination and willingness to step outside his comfort zone to advance his goals. Though less is publicly documented about Lamarian's early life compared to Adaija's extensively chronicled achievements, local reports consistently described him as a dedicated athlete with genuine potential in football. His commitment to sports suggested a disciplined approach to self-improvement and achievement. Those who knew Lamarian described a young man focused on future success through athletics and academics. His move to Fort Wayne represented a strategic decision to access better opportunities for advancement, a mature choice that indicated his seriousness about building a meaningful future. While the precise nature of Adaija and Lamarian's relationship isn't extensively documented, their presence together in the vehicle on January 29th suggests a connection through friendship or shared social circles. Both were part of the same community and age group, navigating the transition from high school to adult life. What is clear is that both young people were on trajectories towards significant personal and professional achievements. Their paths crossed in Fort Wayne, where both were working toward ambitious goals that required dedication, talent, and persistence. In the days preceding their deaths, both Adaija and Lamarian had been active on social media platforms. Adaija, with her established online presence, regularly shared content with her followers. Initial reports following the murders mentioned that the victims had engaged in live stream activity in the days before the incident, including what appeared to be an interaction with police. This live stream gained attention online, with viewers and followers commenting and sharing the content. While specific details about the nature of this police interaction aren't thoroughly documented, the broadcast increased the visibility of both teenagers within their community and online spheres. Local media reports initially questioned whether this increased online visibility might have played a role in the subsequent violence. The timing, just days before the murders, raised questions about whether someone watching had targeted them as a result. However, the investigation would later focus more on other evidence than this potential connection. While the live stream increased their public profile temporarily, investigators ultimately found different factors more relevant to establishing motive and identifying suspects. The coincidence of timing between their online broadcast involving police and their murders days later contributed to early speculation about targeted retaliation. Though this theory wasn't conclusively established, it demonstrated how social media activities can potentially increase vulnerability by broadcasting locations, routines, and personal details to unknown viewers with potentially harmful intentions. The broadcast represented one of their final shared activities, a modern digital footprint that would become part of the investigation into how two promising young lives ended so suddenly and violently on Romey Avenue. The investigation into the deaths of Adijah Oki and Lamarian Bailey began immediately on January 29, 2024, when authorities responded to reports of gunshots on Romey Avenue in Fort Wayne. Upon arrival, officers secured the crime scene, a parked car containing the bodies of both victims, each suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. The Allen County Coroner's Office quickly determined the cause of death, confirming what was apparent. A double homicide had occurred. In the crucial first 48 hours, investigators collected physical evidence from the scene, conducted initial neighborhood canvasses, and began reviewing available surveillance footage from nearby residences and businesses. These early efforts established a foundation for what would become a months-long investigation. As January turned to February, detectives faced significant challenges. Despite the residential setting of the crime, witnesses were initially hesitant to come forward. This reluctance, often stemming from fear of possible retaliation, created obstacles for investigators trying to piece together the events of that night. Nevertheless, the investigation continued to gain momentum. By reviewing extensive surveillance footage from multiple locations, investigators identified suspicious activity near the crime scene. The footage revealed two individuals approaching the parked car in a manner that suggested premeditation, rather than a random attack or robbery gone wrong. Digital evidence became increasingly important as the investigation progressed. Investigators analyzed cell phone data, including geolocation information, that would later prove crucial in placing suspects at the scene during the time of the murders. This digital trail, combined with gradually emerging witness statements, began to point toward specific individuals. By mid-spring, investigators had narrowed their focus to two primary suspects: 21-year-old Diane White and 17-year-old Iran Washington. White, a Fort Wayne resident, became the primary person of interest based on evidence suggesting he was the main shooter in the incident. Washington, originally from Alabama and briefly enrolled at a local Fort Wayne high school, was identified as the second suspect. The investigation took a significant turn when authorities gathered enough evidence to obtain search warrants. On June 26, 2024, nearly 6 months after the murders, police executed a search warrant at White's residence, leading to his arrest. The evidence collected during this operation further strengthened the case against both suspects. Locating Washington proved more challenging, as he had relocated to Alabama sometime after the murders. Law enforcement coordination between Indiana and Alabama authorities eventually led to his apprehension and subsequent extradition back to Fort Wayne to face charges. By summer 2024, both suspects had formally charged with 2 counts of murder. White faced additional sentencing enhancements related to the use of firearms during the commission of the crime. The severity of these charges reflected the gravity of the case. If convicted, White could face up to 150 years in prison, while Washington could receive up to 130 years. The prosecution's case rested on multiple forms of evidence: surveillance footage capturing the suspect's movements, witness testimonies that eventually emerged despite initial reluctance, and digital data placing both individuals at the scene. What began as a challenging investigation with limited witness cooperation had developed into a solid case against both suspects. White's trial was scheduled to begin on October 29, 2024, with Washington's legal proceedings continuing to develop as prosecutors prepared their case. The investigation had transformed from a tragic double homicide with few leads into a comprehensive case ready for judicial proceedings. Throughout the investigation, detectives methodically built their case through traditional evidence gathering combined with modern technological tools. The process demonstrated the evolution of criminal investigations in the digital age, where surveillance footage and location data often provide critical links that traditional witness statements alone might not establish. At this point in our coverage of this heartbreaking case, I want to acknowledge the impact these stories have on all of us. True crime isn't just about shocking details. It's about understanding how investigations work and how justice eventually finds its way. If you're finding this analysis valuable, please take a moment to hit the like button. Your engagement helps this channel reach more people interested in thoughtful, detailed coverage of cases that deserve attention. For those who haven't subscribed yet, joining our community means you'll never miss future investigations and updates on cases like this one. I'm committed to providing you with thorough, respectful coverage of true crime cases. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you noticed how digital evidence is changing modern investigations? Your insights contribute to our community discussions. Now, let's examine the two individuals charged with this shocking crime and what might have motivated their actions. At 21 years old, Diane White emerged as the principal figure in this case. A Fort Wayne resident, White's background revealed concerning patterns that preceded the January murders. According to investigation records, he had been involved in previous violent incidents, suggesting that the attack on Adijah and Lamarian wasn't an isolated event, but part of a troubling behavioral pattern. White's online presence became a focus for investigators. His social media accounts displayed content that glorified weapons and violence, creating an image of someone comfortable with aggression and intimidation. His profiles featured distinctive tattoos and posts that investigators believed might indicate gang affiliations or aspirations for notoriety within certain circles. The evidence collected during the investigation pointed to White as the primary shooter in the attack. His actions at the scene, captured partially through surveillance and later corroborated by witness accounts, demonstrated a level of calculation that alarmed investigators. Rather than a spontaneous act, the attack appeared methodical, suggesting premeditation and intent. The second suspect, 17-year-old Iran Washington, presented a different but equally concerning profile. Originally from Alabama, Washington had only briefly attended a local high school in Fort Wayne before becoming involved in the incident. This transient educational history suggested potential instability in his background, a factor that may have contributed to his alleged participation in criminal activity. Despite his young age, Washington's involvement wasn't limited to this case. Investigation records indicated his possible connection to another homicide in February 2024, just weeks after the murders of Adijah and Lamarian. This suggested an escalating pattern of violent behavior rather than a one-time involvement. Washington's role in the attack, working alongside White, demonstrated coordination between the two suspects. His actions, combined with his subsequent flight to Alabama, where he was eventually located, indicated awareness of the severity of the crime and attempts to avoid consequences. The investigation revealed that the attack on January 29th was not random, but carefully planned. Surveillance footage and witness accounts reconstructed a sequence of events that began with the suspects identifying and monitoring the victim's vehicle on Romey Avenue. The attackers positioned themselves strategically for the assault, approaching the parked car from angles that maximized their advantage while minimizing their visibility to potential witnesses. Once in position, they executed the attack with devastating efficiency, firing multiple shots into the vehicle before quickly fleeing the scene. This tactical approach, the positioning, timing, and immediate escape, pointed to preparation rather than impulse. The suspects had apparently selected their targets deliberately and chosen a method designed to ensure fatal outcomes while minimizing their own risk of identification or apprehension. While investigators haven't definitively established a single motive for the killings, several potential factors emerged during the investigation. The backgrounds of both perpetrators suggested possible gang connections, particularly White, whose social media content and previous activities hinted at affiliations with groups known for violent behavior. Personal vendettas represent another potential motivation. Though the exact nature of any prior interaction between the perpetrators and victims remains unclear, investigators explored whether previous disputes or perceived slights might have triggered the violent response. The methodical nature of the attack suggested that whatever the underlying cause, it escalated to deadly intent rather than remaining within the boundaries of typical youth conflicts. The premeditation evident in their actions indicated a deliberate decision to pursue lethal violence rather than any other form of resolution. Following months of investigation, White was arrested on June 26, 2024, after a search warrant was executed at his residence. The evidence collected proved sufficient to file formal charges against him for the double homicide. Washington's apprehension proved more complex, as he had relocated to Alabama following the incident. After being located, he was extradited back to Indiana to face justice for his alleged role in the killings. Both suspects now face 2 counts of murder each. White received additional sentencing enhancements related to his use of firearms during the crime. If convicted, White could be sentenced to up to 150 years in prison, while Washington faces a maximum sentence of 130 years. White's trial was scheduled to begin on October 29, 2024, with Washington's legal proceedings continuing to unfold as prosecutors built their case. The combined evidence, surveillance footage, witness statements, and digital data created a compelling case against both individuals as they awaited their day in court to answer for the lives of Adijah Oki and Lamarian Bailey. The murders of Adijah Oki and Lamarian Bailey cannot be viewed in isolation. Their deaths occurred within a complex framework of systemic issues that continue to affect communities across America. Examining these factors helps us understand not just why this specific tragedy happened, but why similar incidents continue to occur despite our collective grief after each one. At the center of this case, and countless others like it, lies the issue of firearms accessibility. The investigation highlighted how readily available weapons remain for individuals with violent intentions. The suspects in this case, including a 17-year-old, managed to obtain and use multiple firearms in the commission of this crime. Current policies regarding gun sales and possession contain gaps that allow weapons to circulate with insufficient oversight. In communities where violence has become normalized, firearms often change hands through informal channels that bypass background checks and waiting periods designed to prevent weapons from reaching those most likely to misuse them. The case of Adijah and Lamarian demonstrates the lethal consequences when firearms fall into the hands of young people who resort to violence as a solution to conflicts. More robust regulatory frameworks could potentially create barriers between those with violent tendencies and the means to act on them with deadly force. Both perpetrators in this case were young, one still a legal minor at 17. Their involvement points to factors that contribute to youth violence across America. When young people lack positive direction and support, they become more vulnerable to negative influences that can lead to violent behavior. For Washington in particular, his unstable educational history, briefly attending a Fort Wayne school before disengaging, suggests missed opportunities for intervention. Schools often serve as crucial points of connection for at-risk youth, providing structure and adult guidance that might otherwise be absent. The transition from adolescence to adulthood represents a particularly vulnerable period. Both victims and perpetrators were navigating this challenging phase of development, albeit in drastically different ways. While Adijah and Lamarian channeled their energies into positive pursuits like modeling, entrepreneurship, and athletics, their alleged killers directed their energies toward destructive paths. The case raises questions about available community resources for young people in Fort Wayne. In areas where youth engagement programs are underfunded or non-existent, teenagers and young adults may lack constructive outlets for their time and energy. This absence creates voids that can be filled by negative peer influences or destructive activities. Prevention requires investment in community structures that provide guidance, opportunity, and support for young people at critical junctures in their development. Programs focused on mentorship, skills development, conflict resolution, and positive recreation offer alternatives to violence and pathways toward productive futures. Economic challenges often underlie increased violence in communities. Limited opportunities for legitimate economic advancement can make illegal activities appear as viable alternatives, particularly to impressionable young people. The contrast between the promising futures of Adijah and Lamarian and the apparent aimlessness of their alleged killers highlights how different economic and social realities can exist within the same geographical area. Addressing these disparities requires coordinated efforts to create economic opportunities, improve educational outcomes, and build stronger social support networks in vulnerable communities. Without addressing these fundamental issues, surface-level interventions are unlikely to produce lasting change. Could this tragedy have been prevented? While no single intervention guarantees prevention, multiple approaches might have altered the trajectory. Stronger firearms regulations could have created barriers between the perpetrators and the weapons they used. Enhanced community safety measures, including more proactive policing focused on known trouble spots, might have deterred the attack or led to earlier intervention. More robust youth support programs could have engaged Washington during his brief school enrollment, potentially redirecting his path away from violence. Mental health and counseling services might have helped address underlying issues that contributed to violent tendencies in both suspects. The most effective prevention strategies combine policy-level changes with community-level engagement. Stricter gun regulations, expanded youth programs, mental health support services, and economic opportunity initiatives, working in concert, create environments where similar tragedies become less likely. The deaths of Adijah and Lamarian serve as painful reminders of what happens when these preventive measures are absent or insufficient, and what communities stand to gain by strengthening them. As the investigation concluded, the legal process began in earnest. Both Diane White and Aaron Washington now face 2 counts of murder each, serious charges that reflect the gravity of their alleged actions. For White, additional sentencing enhancements were added related to his use of firearms during the commission of the crime, potentially increasing his sentence significantly. The stakes are extraordinarily high for both defendants. If convicted, White could face up to 150 years in prison, effectively a life sentence with no meaningful possibility of release. Washington, despite his youth, could receive up to 130 years behind bars. These potential sentences reflect both the severity of the crime and the state's determination to hold the perpetrators accountable. White's trial was scheduled to begin on October 29, 2024. The proceedings will allow prosecutors to present the substantial evidence gathered during the months-long investigation, including surveillance footage, witness testimonies, and digital data that places both suspects at the scene on January 29th. Washington's case continues to develop as prosecutors prepare for what will likely be a separate but equally significant legal proceeding. His status as a minor at the time of the murders adds complexity to the case, but doesn't diminish the seriousness of the charges he faces. The murders of Adijah and Lamarian continue to resonate throughout Fort Wayne. Their families face the impossible task of rebuilding lives shattered by senseless violence. Parents who once looked forward to watching their children walk across graduation stages or pursue dreams in fashion and athletics now navigate the painful reality of those futures extinguished. For classmates, friends, and teachers, the absence of these 2 young people creates voids that cannot be filled. Schools that should have celebrated Adijah's scholarship and Lamarian's athletic achievements instead held memorial services and grief counseling sessions. The wider community faces its own reckoning with this tragedy. Fort Wayne residents must confront difficult questions about youth safety, violence prevention, and how to protect promising young people from becoming victims of preventable crimes. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this case is the unrealized potential it represents. Adijah will never launch her fashion career or complete her business degree. Her makeup artistry, through Glammed by Armani, will never grow into the successful enterprise it might have become. Her warm personality and positive spirit will never again brighten the rooms she entered. Lamarian Bailey will never compete on college football fields or discover where his athletic talents might have taken him. His move to Fort Wayne in pursuit of better opportunities ended not with achievement, but with tragedy. The dedication and discipline he brought to his sport never had the chance to fully blossom. Their legacies now exist not in what they accomplished, but in what they represented. Young people with dreams, talents, and the determination to pursue them. Their stories remind us of how much is lost when violence claims young lives. The judicial process, while necessary, cannot restore what has been lost. True justice extends beyond courtroom verdicts to addressing the conditions that allow such tragedies to occur. Meaningful change requires community involvement and a commitment to creating environments where young people can safely pursue their aspirations. This means advocating for better safety measures in neighborhoods, supporting youth programs that provide positive alternatives to violence, and working toward policy reforms that reduce access to firearms for those who would misuse them. As we conclude this devastating story, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect on what we can all do to prevent similar tragedies. These aren't just news stories, they're real lives cut short, families forever changed, and communities left searching for answers. If this video has impacted you, please hit the like button and subscribe to support more in-depth coverage of cases that deserve attention and understanding. Sharing this video might help raise awareness about youth violence prevention, potentially making a difference in your own community. I'd appreciate your thoughts in the comments below. What community initiatives have you seen make a real difference in preventing youth violence? How can we better protect promising young people like Adijah and Lamarian? Thank you for joining me for this difficult but important story. Until next time, remember that awareness and action are our best tools against tragedy.